And knowing what you know now, what would you do differently on day one of implementing this new system?
Yeah. So my first year, um, my first instinct is dive right into the content. You got to start teaching. You got to get kids through all these standards. You've got all these standards you got to get through in the year, and that was a big mistake because what you really need to do is you need to spend that first 2 to 4 weeks, depending upon how well you know your students, um, getting to know them, getting to know where they're at, how they've perhaps progressed over the summer. What they know, what they don't know, what their interests are. So at this point now, the first couple weeks in my classrooms, we do learning inventories, we do student interest inventories, we've done Myers-Briggs personality tests, we've had one-on-one interviews. The most fundamental thing in teaching doesn't change in the system. You got to have relationships with your students. You got to know who they are, know what their interests are, so that you can support them when you dive into that content. So I think spending that first month to build classroom culture, establishing classroom norms through democratic processes where students and teachers kind of dive in and decide on what the classroom's gonna work like for that year is really important. And just knowing your students so that when they hit that roadblock, when there's something that they're stuck on, you can go, oh wait, they mentioned that they were interested in this or that, or I know that this is a little bit of, kind of their learning styles maybe more geared towards this assessment or that assessment. And so um, taking that first month to build a classroom culture, get to know your students, and then adapting your content based on their needs is really important. So day one, I would have stopped everything and spent 2 to 4 weeks getting to know my students, and then adapting instruction, content, assessments to student needs.
And knowing what you know now, what would you do differently on day one?
Um, I'm not sure that I would do anything super differently. Just knowing that I would have to be really flexible every day in my classroom. Also knowing that I have to work hard. I have to have everything front loaded for the students. I need to have their pacing calendars ready. I need to have some descriptors of what the targets, what the 2 level, what the 3 level, what the 4 level work is, having that prepared, having the unit prepared, um, front loading that work. It does make less work over the course of the unit for me, but just being really super prepared every time I start a unit with all the information students need. Um, Definitely, every teacher has a bag of tricks. Just remembering that bag of tricks, that's not something different, but remembering that you can pull those tricks out at any time you need them, even if it wasn't in your plan for the day, knowing that there's something there that if a student needs it, hopefully you can find it, even if you have to do a little quick search online or something to help them out. Um, but just be prepared to be flexible, be prepared to work hard, be prepared to have your students um, learn, to finally learn, and to really want to learn.
Excellent. And knowing what you know now, what would you do differently from day one when you were a student teacher or when had your own classroom?
This year, I began the school year probably 2 periods or 2 days per class, and we did not talk about math at all. We talked about habits of mind, we talked about having a growth versus a fixed mindset. I wish I had done that last year when I started teaching. Because in a proficiency-based system, in our system, we talk a lot about time as a variable, but learning as a constant. So that sometimes the students interpret that as learning on their time. And so for me, it's really, really important to drive home the fact that, well, you are learning on your time, but also there's an accountability or work ethic piece that has to go along with that. And I wish that when I first started teaching, um, I had taken that time, invested that time up front, because over the course of a year, if you're losing 10 or 15 minutes of efficiency every class, because of some work ethic or behavior problem, that adds up. And so for me, that those habits of mine of a good learner with that solid work ethic, from the start, that's something that really needs to be driven